Before we begin today's interview, I have some information about today's guest. B. Samples is a longtime Sugar Hill resident, actually since 1945. Her family is very intertwined with the history of Sugar Hill, and she has some wonderful stories to share with us today. Also, she is an accomplished author. Her three works are Maggie McKinnon, The Sparrow's Wing, and The Stone Horseman. Our History Museum in downtown Sugar Hill will have copies of each one of those books for you to come in and look at your convenience. I encourage you to come to the museum. Okay, on to the interview. Hello, my name is Darrell Pruitt. I'm with the Sugar Hill Historic Preservation Society, and we are in for a treat today as I sit down with longtime Sugar Hill resident Beatrice Smith Samples.
Right.
Beatrice, thank you so much for taking the time to share your memories and thoughts of Sugar Hill. Is it okay if I call you B?
Sure.
Okay, B, let's start with an easy one.
Seeing that you're my son-in-law, I'll let you get away with
Oh, okay, see. All right, now I'm in trouble now. Were you born in Sugar Hill?
that. No. I was actually born in Swanee, Georgia. But when I was very small, we moved to Forsyth into the Sharon community. Dad bought a farm there.
Okay. So how old were you when you moved to Sugar Hill?
I was 11.
11. Do you mind me asking what year that was?
1945, we moved in August, right after the end of the Second World War.
Wow. Now, were your parents from Forsyth County? Where were they originally from?
Dad was born in what was called Old Milton County. A lot of people may have never heard of Old Milton County. It is the area now that encompasses Alpharetta and the surrounding communities and Warsaw community.
Okay.
They did away with Milton County. It went broke because of the Depression. And in 1931, it was incorporated into Fulton County.
Okay.
So, and Mom was born in Gwinnett. So.
You moved in 1945. What brought your family from Forsyth County at the time to Sugar Hill?
Well, Dad had stopped farming and he had gone into the lumber business.
So it was a business?
So he didn't need the farm anymore.
Okay. So he moved over here with Better for Business?
Well, yeah, he didn't need a 70-acre farm. I mean, it was just a lame fallow.
Okay.
And he was more centrally located over
And
here.
How did he acquire the land that you had over here?
Well, the story he told us is he bought it from his younger brother who had won it in a poker game.
Okay, that's pretty good. That's pretty
But
good.
I do have the deed, so
It's
I
all
do
legal.
have the deeds way back.
We're all good.
Yeah,
We're
it's all good.
County, leave us alone. So where did you live when you moved to Sugar Hill?
Well, Dad sawed, he got the 8 acres from Uncle Pierce, and he sawed the timber at his mill, every plank, every board of the hardwood flooring, everything, the framing all came, it was all milled.
Wow.
At his sawmill. And the builder was actually Mr. Early Dunking. He built log houses in Sugar Hill then.
Okay.
He was a leader in the church and he was a builder. So he constructed the house.
Okay. And where was it located?
On the 8 acres
Which were
on what is now Sycamore Road.
Okay. What was it? Did it have a name then?
No, it was all rural. There were no paved roads. There were no named streets. It was rural. We had, when we moved, we brought our livestock with us.
Wow.
We brought the cow and the chickens and the pigs. And we had a little barn with a shed, a feed shed on the side of it. We had what was called a smokehouse, but nobody actually smoked their meat. they actually had what we called a salt box.
Oh.
So when you killed the pig, you salted it down in the salt box. You just buried it in this brine salt, the hams and shoulders or whatever, and the bacon or slab bacon. And then you took out the pieces as you need them, dusted and washed the salt off and used it. So
You're making me hungry.
yeah, and we had a big garden plot. So.
Now, today, in today's way of going down Sycamore Road, about where was that home located?
It's about a quarter of a mile on the right.
Okay. Is it past, what was it, would it be past where Appling Road is now?
Appling Road, Olivet Drive, and then there's a couple of houses, and then it's kind of on a rise, a hill, kind of on a hill there.
Okay, okay. And you lived there until you?
Until I married.
Until you got married?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this. Do you remember some of the other families that lived on Sycamore?
Yeah. There was one house between our house and the intersection out there where 20 and Sycamore Road meet. The Cantrell family had a house on the right. The Brogdon family now occupies that.
Okay.
Then beyond us, on the left, Mr. Eston Peppers, and then there was the Crowe family. Then on the right, a little farther down, there was the Chambers family, and I told you about the Chambers son. They had one son, his name was Burl Chambers. He was a friend of my brother Gene, who's 3 years older than me. So Burl kept telling us that his grandpa was a Civil War veteran, and he was like 100 years old.
Oh, wow.
So one day he invited us all to go down and meet his grandfather. So we all trooped down there, all the Smith kids, and we go in, and this gentleman is sitting in this, it looks like a handmade chair. He looks kind of like Colonel Sanders or Santa Claus. He had this huge, bushy hair and white beard flowing down.
Wow.
And I remember he just looked at us, and I don't think he ever said anything. And we just stood, and stared at him, like kids do.
Yeah.
So, but I'll never forget seeing that man sitting there in that chair.
Now, about how old were you then?
That was probably not too long after we moved over.
So 11, 12, something like that?
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
And then on past that, there was a steep hill, and it was called the Jack Pugh Hill, because the Jack Pugh family lived over there. He had a farmhouse there on the left. And beyond that, there was nothing on what is now Sycamore Road. But the Jack Pugh Hill was famous for the school bus getting stuck, because, it was all dirt road. And if it was inclement weather, and it rained a lot, well, people would get stuck going up that hill, and the school bus especially would get stuck.
So y'all you had school buses way back then?
Oh, yeah. We had school buses in Forsyth County. Though we didn't, we mostly walked just to and from school, because we were like a half a mile from the school here.
Mm-hmm.
Now in Sharon, we were like a mile, but we chose to walk, so mainly we walked.
So, if I remember correctly from talking to you, your father, at one point, he owned a pretty sizable piece of property down through what is Sycamore Road. How many houses would you say now are located on property that he owned at one time?
Maybe a dozen. He owned, later after we moved, I don't know how many years, he bought maybe 15 acres across. It was just empty land, and it went back, pretty far into the woods. I don't know how far. I know we used to play in it, and we'd go over there and pick berries, and because it was Daddy's land.
Right.
And he subdivided it into 50-foot lots, which was small, but then people built small houses.
Right.
But he built a couple of houses on 2 of the lots to rent out. And he sold 3 of them to my brother Gene when he and Edna got married.
Okay.
The ones directly across in front of our house. Gene bought 3 lots that gave him 150-foot frontage.
Mm.
And he later, I'm getting ahead of myself, I guess. Anyway, later he and Edna had seen new subdivisions were being built. So they wanted to live in the subdivision. So they bought a lot over in the subdivision, and we bought their house.
Okay.
And we ended up, I actually have lived in 4 different houses on Sycamore Road.
Right all close to each other.
Right close to each other, yeah.
Now, did your father go by Raymond Smith or R.L. Smith? What did he go by?
He was R.H.
R.H.
But
Smith.
mostly everybody called him Raymond.
Called him Raymond.
Yeah.
I know there's a street named for him.
Yeah,
Off of
you
Peachtree
know, well, they
Industrial.
named streets in Sugar Hill after the mayors.
Yeah. And he was one of the early mayors.
He was one of the early mayors, yeah.
And he was very involved in building the church building for Sugar Hill Church then.
Yeah, I remember the day that he and Pastor Roy Davis, who was then the pastor, they drove to Nashville, Tennessee, to the Southern Baptist offices up there, the headquarters, and they picked up the blueprints for the building.
So tell us a little bit more about your dad. What did he do for a living?
Well, when he was 16 years old, he ran away from home. He had a strict dad, so he ran away from home and joined the Navy.
Mm.
So then when he got out of the Navy, he went into farming.
Okay.
So he farmed, and you've heard about, he had this devastating wreck
Terrible.
he was involved in. 4 of the men from the Sugar Hill Baptist Church were visiting a Norcross church, and some young boy turned across in front of him, and he was driving a flatbed truck. Dad went through the windshield, and the bed of the truck crushed, and in fact, they didn't think he was going to live until they got him to the hospital. They carried him to Emory.
Oh my.
And but he survived, and he all his facial bones were all wired back together, and he had back surgery, and his spine was fused. So,
About how old were you when that
we were still in the little wooden church, the little wooden Sugar Hill, the little one-room wooden church with the pot-bellied stove.
Yeah.
I remember the men came in. We had started the service. They left. We started the service, and the service was about half over, and somebody came in and gave us that devastating news.
Oh.
So naturally, their service broke up, and he was just devastated, and it was months and months before he could even eat or walk around or anything. It was terrible, but.
That's sad. But afterwards, I mean, was it afterward he had the store here?
Yeah, see, then he couldn't, the mill, his sawmill, he couldn't operate that, because operating a sawmill, he had to, walk, the land, and he could walk into a stand of timber, and he would calculate how many board feet he could saw and mill off of that. And then he would lease the timber rights and bring his mill in. He had about a 6-man crew, and he had big logging horses, like the Clydesdales.
Yes.
I remember the first time I saw those logging horses. He brought them and turned them into the pasture, and they were gigantic. And one of them, the biggest one, was named Shorty. I don't know why, because he was not short. But anyway, he was named Shorty. But, and then later on, he owned that general store that stood right here where this building is.
Oh, really? So,
Yeah,
so we're basically
right here, yeah.
sitting where his store was.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the name of it? Do you remember the name of it?
They didn't, stores really
They were
didn't
just a
have,
store.
they were just known as,
So-and-so store.
yeah.
Okay.
Jerry Wheeler's dad had one. Hubert Wheeler had one out there where the old city hall used to be.
Okay.
And later, Rocky Venable had one out there at the corner where the Quick Trip is, or the racetrack. And they just sold very minimal stuff. You could buy matches and kerosene for your lamp, and There were no filling stations or anything like that. You couldn't get fresh milk or produce. You could get canned salmon and sardines and crackers, candy bars. Oh, and they had, they had the ice box with the Cokes and the D-Highs and the RC Colas and whatever in it. Then in the bag was stacks of chicken feed and cow feed and.
Okay. So where we're sitting right here, what would if we walked in the store, what would we?
Well, in the front they were like you would have a counter. You had an aisle in the middle, for the customers to come in and out.
Okay.
Then you had a counter on each side, and then you had room behind the counter for the salesperson, which might be me, and Dad or Gene when he was young enough.
Yeah.
At lunch, a lot of the kids didn't want to eat in the lunchroom, so if they had 15 cents,
so they'd come over to the store.
they'd go to the store, and they'd buy a pack of peanut butter crackers, like the Lance.
Oh yeah.
Or a little bag of peanuts, a Milky Way,
Yeah,
or
I'd much rather had that when I was a kid than
absolutely
lunch.
a Coke out of the ice box. Yeah. So I had to go down there and do double duty. I had to eat my crackers and drink my Coke and wait on all these kids.
Life was hard.
It was very difficult. And then run back to class.
But you were getting paid.
I was up to it.
You were getting paid.
Yeah, I got my lunch free, I guess.
Okay, so I heard a story. You can either, if you would, confirm or deny this story.
I'm probably guilty, whatever.
Well, I heard that you and a friend, I believe, ran the power bill way up high at the store
We
one
did.
time.
We did. My friend from Sharon came over, and Dad had back surgery. He was in a cast from his hips up to under his arms, and so it was the summertime, and I was designated to run the store.
You're running the store. How old are you?
I don't know, 15, 16.
Okay.
So I had the key, and I'd go in and unlock it every day. The vendors would come in, I'd order from them whatever we needed and whatever. So, but I would get bored, and so I invited Betty Jean Terry, my best friend from Sharon. So she comes over to spend the day. So we lounge around on the feed sacks there in the back of the store, and we ran the radio. And of course, I was guilty of running the radio when I was there by myself. I got bored, and so Dad got the light bill. And it had been like $4 or $5, and it was $6.
Oh my goodness!
So I got carried high for that. But, so I didn't get to play the radio anymore.
So the radio privileges
that was cut off.
were revoked.
That was cut off.
Wow. Well, let me ask you this. Change the subject a little bit. Tell us about your mother. What was she like? What did she do?
Well, she was, I guess, the best mom in the world.
Wow.
My mom thought of herself before anybody else.
What was her maiden? She was
a Samples.
What was her name?
Yeah.
Her full name?
Della Gardalina Samples.
Okay.
In fact, they named her Gardalina at birth, and she hated that name. So when she was like, I don't know, 4 or 5, she announced one day that she was not Gardalina. She was Della.
Della.
So,
That's
yeah.
it. Okay.
So from then on, she was Della.
So she was the best mama in the world, but she was not Gardalina.
She was not Gardalina.
Okay.
But when this happened to Dad, I mean, you talk about like a steel magnolia. She was that. I mean, she never missed a beat.
Wow.
There were 5 of us kids at home, all underage. I mean, none of us able to earn a dime or a nickel or whatever. But she ran the house, and she took care of Dad through all of those illnesses. But she never failed to have supper. I mean, she was right by the clock. Everything went on, whatever.
That's amazing.
And she never sat down. She never moaned. She never moaned her fate.
And what people don't realize today, and I'll try to explain the difference, but back in those days, there was no such thing as disability insurance.
Oh, no.
Or health
no.
insurance or
No.
Social Security.
Food stamps, nothing. You were on your own.
You were on your own.
You were on your own.
When the breadwinner's out.
When the breadwinner's out. And I mean, I'm not bragging or anything, but Dad was doing well.
Mm-hmm.
If he had the meal, he was doing well. Mm-hmm. But then everything came to a screeching halt. Mm. And whatever savings, I mean, the hospital bill was astronomical because he was there, I don't know, for a long time. And then there were all those surgeries.
Yeah.
And of course, Mom had to be there to take care of him because, I mean, he was an invalid for a long time. Mm-hmm. But no matter how, she always managed. We never went hungry. We always had food and clothes. The bills were paid. Of course, I'm sure he had some savings. I didn't know anything about the finances, but I know we made it through.
Made it, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then when Dad got better, he did various things. He had the store. At one time, he owned a partnership in a new car dealership uptown. That was where I drove the car.
I want to hear about that. Okay, so in the early 50s, to be a teenager with access to a new car or a car, that had to be a big thing.
Honey, it was not a new car, now let me tell you
but
that.
It was a car.
It had wheels and it would run.
How many of your friends had cars? Probably not very
None.
many. Yeah.
None. Well, my senior year, he was in the dealership up there. And so I was hired as the part-time bookkeeper.
Okay.
So in order to get to and from the dealership, I had to have wheels. So they would they would pick out what I was allowed to drive, and usually every day it was a different car.
Oh, wow.
So, what do you do about gas when you're driving a different vehicle every day? You just hope you don't run out before you get where you're going. And they would laugh at me at the gas station. Sometimes I would go in and buy a dime's worth of gas, which was like a third of a gallon.
Yeah, but that'd get you back home. Yeah.
I mean, if I put a lot of gas in it and I couldn't drive it tomorrow morning, I was making $15 a week.
Okay.
So, you don't throw your money around on gas.
No.
But anyway, so nobody at the school, no high school student, had access to a car. In fact, most families only had one vehicle, and some families did not have a vehicle.
So you were very popular.
I was very, very privileged. But now, I was not allowed to drive this thing. I know one time I carried some girlfriends to the movies, and I don't know other than that. But I was given,
Did you have permission to do that?
I must have. I mean, I was a good girl.
Okay, I'm sure you were. I'm sure you were.
But I know, anyway, I'll tell you this. This is what happened to us one night. When I took them to the movies, the brakes were fine on this Ford, this 1939 Ford.
Okay.
They was fine, when I picked up the first one and let her off. But then when I got to Nellie Ruth Trebble's house, so I intended to stop, in front of her house on Whitehead Road, I believe. And when I put on the brake, I didn't have any brake. So I just drifted up the hill. And then I put on and then it stopped and it drifted back down the hill into the hollow. And I said, well, you better get out. Nellie Ruth, why we stopped?
Why you guys going slow enough to get out?
Yeah, well, it's safe for you to get. So Nellie Ruth bailed out. What happened? All the brake fluid had finally drained out, and it had no brakes. But anyway, I did safely get home. And one time, they gave me one, and it had what they called a governor on it. And it would not go over about 35 miles an hour. I don't care how much you just went 35. You just went 35 miles an hour. So I never knew one day to the next what they would put me in.
It's funny, people talk about the good old days, and there's some good things about it, but what they don't understand is that cars, even in my early days, I mean, something broke about every other day. I mean, there were so many things that can go wrong with it.
Yes.
Well, today it's just like you buy a car, take good care of it, it'll last you forever. But not then. And the brake fluid could just be fine, and then it's gone, and you ain't got no brakes.
I mean, it had evidently it had started, draining out. I don't know why we were in the movies or when, but it was gone when we got to Nellie Ruth's house.
Okay, I'm gonna brag on you here a little bit. I have been perusing an old Sugar Hill High School annual, the memento.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that you were class president in both your junior and senior years, and you were named most representative of Sugar Hill High School as a senior. And if you don't mind, I'd like to read what they wrote about you.
All right.
The student body, by popular vote, chose Beatrice Smith as the girl most representative of Sugar Hill High School. They could hardly have made a more accurate choice. She is an outstanding student and has shown remarkable business ability as buyer for the school store for 2 consecutive years. She is an excellent typist and has been of invaluable service to the staff of the memento this year. She has been president of her class for the past 2 years. Her sunny disposition, friendly manner, and willingness to do any task allotted her have endeared her to everyone connected with the school. It is hard to visualize Sugar Hill without her.
I'm sure it sunk into the sea after all that.
That's pretty, well, no, you never left. I mean, you're still here in Sugar Hill.
Well, yeah,
You're
that's
still
right.
here. That's pretty impressive.
I'm sure
So,
they still talk about me.
What was your first job? Your first job?
The one at the Pontiac Company where I got the car. That was
Okay. Okay.
that was the first one. What I did, somebody came in, they looked, they bought a car. If they bought a new car, I filled out a new car sales slip. If they bought a used car, which we had many of, as you just heard, then I would fill out. Usually they had to pay. They paid for them with a note on notes. I don't know if you know legally what that is. You just fill out a note and you say you owe $500 on this car, a promissory note. And then every time you flip it over and on the back, if they come in and pay $5 or $10. So I kept up with that, wrote the notes and put the, and I did. I actually made kept the ledgers.
Oh, wow.
The debits and the credits.
Okay.
The auditor just came in and showed me, put this here and put this here, and that's what I did. But I didn't have actually any bookkeeping training, but
that's impressive too.
yeah, that's what I.
So y'all had new cars and used cars.
You got Pontiacs, new Pontiacs.
Some of the used
And
cars.
it was located there on the square in Buford.
Okay, in Buford.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the used cars had brakes and some of them didn't.
Some of them were in pitiful. I can attest some of them were in pitiful shape. They didn't let me. Well, they let me drive the ones they thought nobody's going to buy today.
Right. But that's still, well, you were okay with that though.
Oh yeah, it was a car.
That's right. Tell me how you met your husband, Louis Samples.
Well, it was very romantic.
Oh.
I had gone up to visit my cousin, Eloise Samples. She lived on the hill behind what was the ice plant then, the Buford ice plant. And but I got up there, of course, I guess I just dropped in. And, well, she had a date. So her brother, Darrell, was there, and he said, well, me and you will just go to the movies. We'll just walk up to the movies. So we did. Me and Darrell walked up to the movies. So we left the movies, and we're walking back, and we're right along there by the railroad track where the Lumite plant, was. So this car stops, and he offers, he says, Samples, you want a ride? And Gerald said, oh, yeah. I said, yeah, come on, B. I said, I don't know that man. I said, I'm not getting in that car. And he says, oh, it's just Louis. I said, I don't know just Louis, and I'm not getting in that car. But you see what happened.
I see what happened.
I got in the car.
Yes. And that was, y'all were married, what year were you married?
1951. I graduated in May the 31st, and we married on June the 9th.
Wow.
All the kids got married early back then.
Well, yeah.
I guess I don't know if we were.
No, that was just what you did.
Yeah, that's just what you did.
It was the same way for my generation too.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
Yeah. I mean, most all of us did. We married, that summer.
So after, tell us more about your work history as you went on.
Well, after I graduated, I had met a gentleman that was working down at the Lockheed Aircraft Corporation, and he told me, he said, you should go down there. You should. So he brought me an application, and I filled it out, and I got a job as a stenographer typist. So I worked for about 6 engineers. I don't know if they were aircraft engineers, mechanical engineers. All I know is they wrote what they called JIs, job instructions.
Okay.
So I took, some of them I took dictation, some of them they just wrote them out. They were very, technical.
But let's just be honest, you're probably smarter than all of them, right?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay. All right.
So anyway, that's what I did there. So it was, I don't know if anybody would be interested in, but when I went to work, I worked in, the office was located in what they called a mezzanine. These were like catwalks up above where the assembly line where all the planes were assembled.
Wow.
I had never seen anything like
Wow.
that. But it was called a mezzanine, and you could stand on that catwalk and look down and you could see those planes, B-47 bombers,
That's exciting.
down through there as they were working on them, and see what they were doing. They were writing instructions, that applied to whatever was going on down on that line. And if you ever forgot your badge, your picture ID, you would not get in.
That's important.
Because it was in an underground bunker, and you entered the place through. There were like 3 different head houses. It was a long building underground, and there were what called head houses, and you walked in and you walked down and you walked into the tunnel.
Yeah. Wow. Now, was the Korean War going on then?
No, this was no, the Korean War hadn't started.
It hadn't started yet.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the Cold
See,
War
this was like the summer of '51,
Okay.
summer and fall of '51.
But the Cold War was on.
Oh yeah. But it was all very, restricted. Everything was. I mean, the building was hidden. You couldn't see it was underground. But.
So you worked there for a while. How did you? I know at one time you worked for Sears downtown Atlanta.
Well, I worked there, and when they finished the contract that they had, they wanted to put me on a different job because, those men didn't need to write instructions because there was nothing going on right then. So I didn't want, it was a long commute, and so I decided that I'd do something else. So I went to the Alice Chalmers Distribution Center in Chamblee, and I was a receptionist stenographer there.
Okay.
I took dictation from the office manager, and I worked the front desk, people coming in and out, answering the phone and so forth. And what the Alice Chalmers did, they distributed heavy industrial machinery and farm machinery to dealers all over the Southeast, Florida, North and South Carolina,
Oh, wow.
Georgia, Tennessee. So I stayed there, and then I saw an ad for a secretarial position with Sears. So I went to Sears and applied for that, and I had a private office in the Sears Tower overlooking Crackers ball field.
Oh, Ponce de Leon Park.
Ponce de Leon
Ooh.
Park. So on afternoons when the boss wasn't in,
Uh-huh.
I could peek out at the ball game every now and then. But
You should have took some pictures of that.
I know, that was, in the Sears Tower, but, and the Crackers ball field.
Oh, yeah.
You see how, and that was the first time I had ever seen an electric typewriter.
Oh, that's big doings.
I had an electric typewriter at Sears.
Well,
Before I had, like the
The
manual
manuals.
Underwoods
Yeah.
and whatever.
half the people watching this don't even know what a typewriter is.
And I thought about that. Word processors. We took dictation. Greg's shorthand.
Mm-hmm.
So I had 2 years of that in high school. So you took this dictation on this pad, and then you go in and type it up on your. Up until then, manual typewriter, but I had an electric typewriter.
That was nice.
But there was no blocking out things and moving things. You just had to start the whole thing over. If you didn't get it right, you would just.
I don't even whiteout wasn't invented yet, was it?
Well, I think we did have. that.
Okay.
But mostly you just had a little eraser, and you hoped that if you erased it, it didn't leave a big old black spot. So you better be right the first time.
Now, let me ask you this. I know a lot of people here in Sugar Hill, over the last couple generations, their children or themselves kind of sort of grew up under your roof too, as you had. Tell us about that business that you had.
Well, I was working at Sears and I found out that I was going to have my second child, who is your wife,
Yes.
Vicki.
The most beautiful woman in the world.
Yeah.
Sweetest, smartest.
I know it. Well, we can't say enough about Vicki. But anyway, we had moved to Atlanta when I started working at Sears.
Mm-hmm.
Because, there just wasn't any child care available in Sugar Hill. I tried, and I had Steve. I had my first baby.
Yeah.
And when I went to work, he was, like 8 or 9 months old. There was just, I tried with a couple of local ladies. Nothing worked out, so we decided we'd just relocate. So we moved down there. But then when I found out that I was going to have a second child, I thought, I do not want to raise a family in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't. I want to go home.
Okay.
So that was when Gina and Edna were looking at houses in the subdivision.
Oh,
yeah, they
okay.
were. So then we bought their house,
Okay.
and that's where Vicki was born there.
Mm-hmm.
Steve was born further out the street in the front one we first lived in when we got married, and he came back from service. But then when Vicki was about maybe 3, I thought, well, maybe I could try some in-home child care. The neighbor next door wanted me to take her little boy,
That's how
care
it
for him.
started.
So I took him. Then I took my cousin Dot samples her children. And so I had 4 or 5, and I thought, well, I'll just get a license, So we built onto the house. I got a license, and at one point, I think I had 3 employees and about 50 children.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So finally, that's when we bought Dad's, most of his land. We bought 5 acres from Dad.
Okay.
And built where we currently are and where you are too now.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how that came about. So we took that entire house
So you
just
had
for the daycare center.
50 children.
Well, we had infants, and then we had the toddlers, and then we had the after-school children. We had them in the summer.
And I've heard Vicki, I think you worked her pretty good at that too for a while, didn't you?
Well, she helped. Steve helped. It was a business, it was a family business. So.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah.
What would you say, let me ask you this first. Do you have memories of when Beaufort Dam was built, Lake Lanier was created, how that impacted you or the people around here?
Well, I don't know that it really did a lot. Well, some of the people who lived over there where the water, they, their land was confiscated, and some of them ended up being our neighbors there on Sycamore Road.
Oh.
I know the Mulder family, they moved from over there.
Okay.
And it dislocated a lot of people.
It probably had an impact on Sycamore Road itself too, when people
Well,
going through to
yeah.
get to the lake and stuff.
Well, there was more traffic, but eventually, some of the roads were named, the roads were paved. So it was, it did change the area. Yeah.
When when did they pave Sycamore Road?
I don't remember the year, but I know at the time that they paved it, the pavement ended right past
Your house.
our house.
I remember, my now wife Vicki talking about when she was little and she had.
You could hear
Yeah.
the traffic when it left the pavement and hit the dirt. It would go bump, bump,
Yeah.
bump.
And apparently, with her having asthma and pneumonia and all that, all the dust was not helping. And
Finally, Daddy donated a few feet, like 40 feet off the front of our property, to give them soil to put on the road to get them to pave it on down a little farther. So that's how that happened.
How about that? B, what would you say are some of the most memorable events that have happened in Sugar Hill in your lifetime? Things that just stick out in your memory.
Well, I guess when we got electricity,
That's pretty big.
that was pretty big. I remember when we turned on that first bare light bulb, that was so thrilling.
Oh, wow.
And to actually be able to plug in your iron and not have to set it on the wood stove to heat it up to get the wrinkles out of your clothes.
My goodness.
And you could have a wringer washing machine, and you didn't have to go down to the wash place and wash them by hand and boil them out in the old black tub. I mean, the black iron pot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, you probably, know what the black iron pots were for.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I
So,
do.
but that was that, and then finally we got running water, and we didn't have to carry water from the spring up to the house.
Yeah,
So-
spring and creek down behind our
Yeah,
house. Your
yeah,
house and
yeah.
our house.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That was our water source. Finally, though, the city got running water. Well, actually, Dad was able to drill a well, and when we got electricity, and he put a pump in the well, and he pumped water into the house.
Well, y'all was living a
But-
life of leisure then.
I
wasn't you?
tell you, we did.
I can't remember what year it was. It's not really in the big picture not that long ago, but I would imagine when the church burned down over here was a pretty big thing.
Oh, yes, that was very, very traumatic. And when we got the Georgia Shoe Company to come to Sugar Hill, that was a biggie. It was built right here
too. Okay,
where the store had stood.
okay.
Mr. Early Wilbanks, who was a businessman in the area, he and Dad and some of the other men, they got together and they formed a corporation. But I think Mr. Wilbanks, Mr. Early Wilbanks, I think he was the head instigator of getting the building built.
Okay.
And they sold shares. So I know Dad bought some shares, and I'm sure Mr. Wilbanks had the lion's share of them. But they built the building, and I know I went with Dad out to see. He went to visit Mr. Wilbanks to own some business along, and I rode along with him. And the Wilbanks house was unique. Anybody that knows anything about Sugar Hill now might remember that house. It was a long house that sat on the bluff where the Sugar Hill Church is now.
Okay.
There was kind of a bluff there.
Okay.
And it was a long house, and it had a flat roof, and the roof contained several inches of water for insulation, which nobody had ever heard of in
Wow.
Sugar Hill, water. And the entire front was glass. It was very, very unique, and people would mention the Wilbanks house, the Wilbanks house, the Wilbanks house. So,
I wonder if there are any pictures of that surviving. There should be
I don't
somewhere.
know, but it was, I've never seen another home like it, and it was real spacious inside. It was very nice. Mr. Wilbanks was well off, but it was really unique. Anyway, they did they got the building built, and the Georgia Shoe Company came in, and they stayed for years, and a lot of ladies in the community, were able to supplement the family income by
Yes.
working there. Mom worked there for
Yeah.
about 20 years. So finally, they moved it to Flowery Branch, and then I think a window and door company came into that same building.
Okay.
But that building, see, there were no jobs. There was nothing in Sugar Hill for anybody to do, to make a living. There just wasn't anything. So that was a big thing when that was brought in.
I bet it was. Made a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
If you could tell people one thing about Sugar Hill that they might not know, or three or four things.
Well,
what would it be?
after you mentioned that, I thought about it, and I thought, well, Sugar Hill used to be quite a recreation center. Where they're building that assisted living facility out there
Yes.
on 20.
Mhm.
Well, as you head past that to the right, there down in that, there was a big roller skating rink. It was a gigantic building. seemed like to me it was painted red. If I don't, I would, don't hold me to that. But Mr. Humphrey owned it.
Okay.
So that was a big thing here. Teenagers, we all congregated. I did not risk life and limb on the rollerblades, but it was roller skates. But I did, we all hung around out there, and dating couples, you hung around out there, and you met all your friends, and the brave ones got out and skate. I mean, there were a lot of them that did skate. I think I tried it a few times, but I decided that wasn't for me. So then later, I don't know for what reason, that one closed and one opened down on the Common Highway. On the right down there, about halfway between here and the river.
Okay.
And it was the same deal, roller skates. You go in, most everybody rented their roller skates. And then later, Mr. Gladstone Bailey, Mr. John Bailey's son, opened a bowling alley, built a bowling alley.
In Sugar Hill?
Yeah, in Sugar Hill. It was there, where our church is, New Hope Church, on Broad Street. You go on out toward Whitehead, and it was back this side of Whitehead there, on that corner.
Okay.
Maybe
Wow.
not right on the corner, but maybe a little back. Anyway, so glad Bailey built that. And I think it had either 2 or 3 lanes, maybe 2. It was not a really broad building, but it was, kind of long. But they didn't have automatic pin setters. So you hired these young boys to hop down in that pit and set up the pins.
Dodged the ball.
And you hoped that somebody didn't roll that ball and those pins went flying before you got them all. But that every time anybody rolled the ball, they had to hop down in there and set all those pins up.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was a bowling alley. Somehow I missed hearing about that.
Well, I don't remember how long it was open, but I know that my younger brother, Tony, he worked out there for a while as a pin boy.
Oh.
So he didn't have any money. They must have had they had a phone in there, but it was a pay phone. It had to have been a pay phone. So anyway, Tony, he's working out there. So he went off and he forgot to carry his brown bag, his lunch sack for that night. He just, worked in the afternoon, after school, until it closed that night. So the phone rang at home, and I picked it up, and I said, hello. This person said, lunch, and hung up. And I thought, well...
Who was that, and what does that mean?
Lunch, what is that? And I thought, how Tony went off without his lunch bag, and he didn't have a quarter for the phone, so he's cheating on phone, he's got lunch. He just picked up, when they said, deposit your quarter, he said lunch.
But and you figured it out.
Yeah, so I carried him his bag of lunch. But
how about that? That's pretty good.
yeah, that was pretty good. Well, we also had the Sugar Hill Drive-In.
What was that?
Sugar Hill Drive-In restaurant.
Yeah.
Ms. Burrell
Yeah, I've heard about that.
and her 4 beautiful girls.
Yeah.
Louise and Joyce and Virginia and Ann. They operated the Sugar Hill Drive-In, and it was just that. I mean, you drove up and they brought your food out there. You put the tray, and you had your food.
Yeah.
And it.
For those younger people watching, that's not just stuff they put on movies. That really happened.
Oh yeah, it operated for years and years, and it hadn't been too many years. I think it changed hands, after Ms. Burrell passed, but it was still operating. Later they had a barbecue place, and a lot of the boys and girls mostly boys from Cumming came over here and met girls from Sugar Hill. And it got to be a real rivalry,
Okay.
They
Can't have that.
No, and sometimes, the Sugar Hill boys would meet the Cumming boys down at the river bridge.
These are our girls.
Right. Yeah, it was a thing. So, and anyway, one of the Forsyth boys, Junior Bagley, married Joyce. So there you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
Now, wasn't there like a drive-in movie place for a little while too? Not too many
Yeah, that was down on, you know where the Lighthouse Church is on
Mhm.
Cumming Highway?
Mhm.
It was right there in that field.
in that Riverside area kind of.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
mhm.
okay.
It was a drive-in theater, yeah. I had forgotten about that, see?
All right.
It was,
This has been great. One last question. Tap into your wisdom for this one. If you could give some advice or words of wisdom to current and future Sugar Hillians, what would it be?
well, I'd say that we have a nice little town here. We have a very nice community. And for the most part, I mean, I've lived here the major part of my life. It's been a very peaceful, I mean, the people get along with each other. We have no problems. Very nice area to raise a family or to live.
Yeah.
So I'd say work to keep it like that.
Oh, that's good. Well, this has been great.
Well, I've enjoyed it.
Any-
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, we're going.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Darrell.
Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap this up?
Well, I was going to tell you that when we moved here, the triangle out here, you know, where they have just built, well, just across from here, where they've just built those apartments, there was the little one-room wooden church, there was the wooden elementary school, and then there was the brick high school, and then there was a gymnasium. The only sports that were organized was the girls and boys basketball. But we played softball. We had a big field there. We played softball and dodgeball and whatever. Then there was a cannery out there where at the end, you know, where it connects with Level Creek. And the ladies would bring their garden produce, and they could can it in tin cans. You just had to pay for your cans.
Oh, okay.
You just bring your produce and you could can. And there was a long wooden table beside the church out under the oak trees that the men had built, and it was used for what they called homecoming or singing all day with dinner on the grounds, whatever you wanted to call it. And so we had many of a Sunday meal there on those tables under the trees at the church. So
Lots of good memories over
yeah,
there.
yeah.
That's great. That is great. And I tell you, this has been wonderful. I appreciate you sharing all these thoughts and memories.
Oh, and when
with
we
us.
were in the little wooden church,
Yeah.
we walked up the hill to the elementary school building for Sunday school classes.
Oh, they let you do that.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, it was, all that was, you know, it was kind of integrated.
Okay.
Mr. T. Carl Bice, he was the principal of the school, both schools, and he was also a leader in the church.
Okay.
And we had a great men's quartet in the church. Mr. T. Carl and Carol Higgins was the tenor. Bob Coker was the bass. And Clifford Cross was the baritone.
Oh, well, that's pretty impressive. You remember?
Yeah, I remember that. And when we first came over here, I remember that Miss Doris Duncan, Mr. Early Duncan's daughter, was the pianist. And then later on, when Sarah Youngblood got old enough, Sarah Youngblood was the pianist. You know, I remember her in the brick church. So.
Well, you could have been the pianist.
Well, back then I didn't. I did. I picked that up as an adult.
I didn't know that.
When I started taking Vicky for lessons, I started dabbling in it.
Oh, okay.
And I learned to play a few hymns.
I did not realize that.
Yeah, I didn't. I never did as a child. I never did.
I just assumed you probably helped teach her.
No, I didn't. I learned as she learned, and it's a lot harder when you're an adult
Now, tell me
to
about
learn
it.
anything than it is when you're a child.
It's a lot harder when
Yeah.
you're 60-something years old.
Yes, it is. It's, you know, it's
Very
still
hard.
it's harder to learn, but you can.
You can, and you never want to stop learning.
I can still, you know, I mean, I still plonk around on it, and I can still learn a new song now. But so don't tell me you can't teach old dogs.
No,
new
you
tricks.
can.
You
You
can.
Amen.
You cannot. You can learn. You can learn.
Yes, you can. Might take an extra minute, but you can.
A little harder work, a little more effort,
That's right.
but what else you got to do?
Right. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome.
This has been great.